Hello and welcome to episode 139 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. On today's show, my good friend Sarah Says is back on the podcast for our third segment of Fact or Figment about Disneyland Resort. We take commonly held opinions about Disneyland and decide if they are facts or if they are figments. I do want to make a small note. I had already written these questions, and I asked one about Disneyland Park introducing more alcohol. I know a few Disneyland restaurants are adding alcohol, but I feel this question still works because it is still a very limited edition. Before we get started, make sure you're a subscriber to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. We have a lot of new things planned for the channel, and you don't want to miss anything. It would also mean a lot to us if you would like videos and comment on them. We've been growing this community, and with that growth, we have done a lot of great things. We've helped others raise funds for good causes, or we have raised them ourselves. Earlier this year, we were able to donate 148 basketballs, soccer balls, and volleyballs to Boys and Girls Club of Central Florida. We've also raised awareness of chronic illness, domestic violence, and other important issues. We're absolutely all about fun on this show, but that doesn't mean we can't do good things with our platform. Thank you, everybody. Right now, let's get things started. Thanks for being here, Sarah.
Thanks for having me back.
So we recently did 2 episodes. One was a version of Fact or Figment for Disney's California Adventure. The other one was a Fact or Figment for Disneyland Park. And we ended up having a few leftover questions for each of the parks. So we are going to kind of combine them together today for a Fact or Figment Disneyland Resort Edition. And if anybody doesn't know what Fact or Figment is on this show, it's a segment where we take a commonly held belief in the Disney community, and Sarah and I decide, based solely on our own opinions, if the statement is a fact or a figment. And yes, I know that the pun is based on a Walt Disney World character, and we have just decided to look past that because it is such a good pun that I think that it is universal. As a matter of fact, it might even be a pun that we use later for Universal. So there is another pun. Anyway, Fact or Figment, Disney's California Adventure is where we're going to start again this time. Fact or Figment, World of Color is the best nighttime spectacular in any U.S. Disney park.
You know what? You did this to me in Disneyland, too. Asking me about Fantasmic.
I did ask you if you thought Fantasmic was the best nighttime spectacular in a U.S. Disney park.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to have to go with the same answer because it's the same thing. Like, there's so many good ones that I don't know. I can't deem which one is the best. If you were putting it up against, like, park to park, like if you were like, if there was, hypothetically, say, a World of Color at Epcot or something, or Hollywood Studios, and you're like, is it better than this one? Kind of like Fantasmic to Fantasmic, then I'd have to say fact. But I'm going to say Figment because there are so many good nighttime spectaculars that I can't say which one is definitively the absolute best.
I am going to say Figment as well, just because when I asked you the same question about Fantasmic at Disneyland and whether it was the best nighttime spectacular in any of the U.S. Disney parks, on that day I was feeling like it was Happily Ever After at Magic Kingdom and Walt Disney World, so I guess I'll have to stick with that answer. But I will say, an argument can be made that World of Color could be the best nighttime spectacular in any U.S. Disney park. As a matter of fact, let me know what you think in the comments, because I know that people have a lot of strong opinions about these shows, and they have a lot of nostalgia attached to them and a lot of personal feelings, like they feel these things in their guts. And we're trying to look at this in an objective way, and this might be too subjective of an opinion to really do a fact or figment on it. Fact or figment? If Disney had built Star Wars Galaxy's Edge at DCA instead of Disneyland Park, it would have made more sense and done a better job balancing crowds between the two parks.
Ooh, I have to think about that for a second.
I know, this is a good one. I was proud of myself for this one.
This is a good one. This is a good one.
We are running into a lot of problems with Magic Key Holders, which is the annual pass holder program at Disneyland, where it is very, very hard for Magic Key Holders to get a park pass reservation for Disneyland Park, which means that then a lot of people are park hopping to Disneyland later. It's causing a lot of issues that DCA needs to, for lack of a better term, eat more people, take up more guests. And with this huge land that has such demand, especially with vacationers, if you could take a few of those vacationers and have them start their day at DCA instead of Disneyland, I don't know. So obviously there were a lot of things that went into this. This isn't the easiest question to answer, but I want you to kind of ponder it for just a minute.
Okay, so read me the question one more time so I can really think about this.
If Disney had built Star Wars Galaxy's Edge at DCA instead of Disneyland Park, it would have made more sense and done a better job balancing crowds between the two parks.
Okay.
Now, one of the things you do have to take into consideration when answering this is where in the heck would you put it at DCA? Like, this isn't a hypothetical question. Like, if you're going to answer it fact, you have to know where you would put it, or you have to have a plan to put it in a good location.
Yeah. To be honest, thinking about this, I'm going to say Figment because of that fact. That was what I was thinking the whole time when you brought that up, is where the heck would it go? Because you'd have to tear out, it would take so long. They'd have to tear out so much of DCA because there isn't the footprint there. Or they'd have to take a lot of space from other areas, and it would take so much stuff that is already there, and you'd have to get rid of it to have that footprint, that by the time it finally opened, by having to tear a bunch of stuff out and figure it out, and the backlash of people who are like the purists of tearing out their favorite things, it's like, where would it even go? Because I'm like,
although, counter argument, the backlash of the purists wasn't that bad to build this in Disneyland Park.
But they didn't tear anything out.
Original park. That's a good point too. There
was a space for it to add it on, and while it was being built, it did not disturb the rest of the park in any way. As you went around, the only thing that there was the railroad for a while, but ultimately you could walk everywhere else or do however you got around. But when you walk by, it's not like you had to walk through a bunch of like walls and things. All there was one gate where a cast member stood and was like, hey, you can't go through her. For a while, it was just the gate closed with a sign that said something new is coming or Galaxy's Edge is coming, but it did not impede your enjoyment of the rest of the park, where if you put it in California Adventure, it would be such a huge undertaking that it would totally disrupt the flow of the whole park to have to take out a bunch of stuff to make the space for it. And then ultimately, because it took so long, it would, but then it's just, for me, I'm going to say Figment, because I think that's what I said was Figment, because also the properties that are there, I mean, you have Avengers Campus, you have Cars Land, you have Pixar Pier, you have all of that. And so to me, I think it's placed perfectly where it is in Disneyland because, like I said, it didn't impede anything for it to be built, and it doesn't take away from the rest of the park at all. I feel like it's in such a space in Disneyland that to be completely honest, if I didn't know it was there, I probably would walk right past it.
So I am going to say that this would have caused a lot of problems to do the construction of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge over at DCA. It probably would have been much harder to find good sight lines and make sure that Star Wars Galaxy's Edge was as cool as it is over in Disneyland. I think there would have been a million problems to building this at Disney's California Adventure. That being said, it is still a fact, and they should have built this at DCA, in my humble opinion, because I think there are major problems with crowd balancing at Disneyland Resort, and I think those things are going to end up being a problem. I don't think they're a problem yet, but it's building up every year more and more of a problem. And since the parks reopened from the pandemic, we're starting to get back to those kind of numbers from pre-pandemic. And I think that's going to start to cause these problems again. And, you know, we're kind of in an economic dip right now. But if the economy starts humming again soon, you're going to have a lot of people trying to balance their time at Disneyland. And it's going to be more and more of an issue.
But I feel like, too, in the same vein, where Galaxy's Edge is in Disneyland, you could have 1 billion people back there and it's not going to affect the flow of the park because they are back in that area. Where in California Adventure, unless they had a way to make it an offshoot like it is in Disneyland, it's going to impede the flow of the rest of the park. And then nobody's going to want to go because they're getting bottlenecked. Like you get bottlenecked going to Cars Land from people going to Avengers Campus. You get bottlenecked there at Rope Drop and things like that. At Disneyland, you don't have that problem. Once you're in Galaxy's Edge, you're in a literal whole other world where I don't think they could do that in California Adventure. It would literally be like walking into Avengers Campus where you can still see everything else. Like you said, sightlines. It wouldn't be a fully immersive experience.
This is like the first time we've had like a McLaughlin group style discussion on this show where we're going back and forth, where everybody's making good points. Like we're not fighting or anything. I hear what you're saying, but all of those people who are huddled back in Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, they are taking up park pass reservations or whatever you want to call it, where they have to denote that they are going to be at Disneyland Park that day. And that's where the problems are being caused. Yes, you are correct about a lot of the actual on-site logistics. But right now, just trying to balance people between those two parks is such a weird issue.
Yeah, but you can still hop halfway through the day. Like, come on. You can still get over there at some point. It's not the end of the world. And if you think it's the end of the world, I'm really sorry you feel that way. But you know what?
I'm not saying it's the end of the world.
And also, we're not all magic key holders. We're not all magic key holders.
No, but what we could do is balance out the magic key holders more, give them more of a reason to pick DCA as their first park of the day. That's what I'm saying when I'm talking about.
Okay, that makes sense. But
no, and we don't have to agree on it. We don't have to agree on it. That's fine. But I think it's just something to sort of look at and think about how this is becoming an issue. Yeah. All right, here's a really controversial one.
Oh, no.
Fact or Figment? Disney's California Adventure is the worst of all 6 U.S. Disney theme parks.
The worst? Oh. Okay, I've been to all of them, and it's the worst of all 6?
Or the least best of all 6?
The least best. Because in my mind, the least best, minus the fact that they have Galaxy's Edge, is Hollywood Studios, in my opinion. So I'm going to say Figment, because I think the least best is Hollywood Studios, minus the fact that they have Galaxy's Edge.
Right. So I think this is going to get into a little bit of a semantic argument about what you mean by worst. Because that is also the one where I am comparing it. Yeah, I have said recently that when I have taken people to full days at Walt Disney World, it always sort of starts to fall apart when we get to Disney's Hollywood Studios. Like, it's not laid out properly or something like that. Like, it wasn't built properly, or the way they have expanded it has made it more of a hassle than it is worth in a lot of ways. I love Toy Story Land. I love Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. These are great things. They have great rides.
Yep.
Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, amazing ride. Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, really fun ride. Toy Story Mania, love it. Slinky Dog Dash, great. Star Wars Rise of the Resistance, maybe the best theme park ride in the country. However, when you try to navigate that park, it doesn't have enough of those small rides that have a 15-minute wait. Star Wars Galaxy's Edge and Toy Story Land are so obnoxiously hot and lacking shade. There are a lot of problems at Hollywood Studios that do not exist at DCA. I think if you are comparing just rides, maybe we could start to have that conversation, or just theming. But when you start talking about a lot of the logistics, I think you have to say that at least Hollywood Studios is worse than DCA.
Yeah, because I can't even put DCA up against an Epcot or Animal Kingdom or Magic Kingdom or Disneyland. It's like, I just can't. I mean, my opinion would probably been different back when DCA first opened, because it wasn't even a half-day park. Like, there just wasn't enough there. And I mean, it was a beautiful park in my opinion, but it just wasn't enough. Where now, I mean, kind of like you were saying, Hollywood Studios has some great rides, but so does DCA. They have rides that you can't ride anywhere else, just like Hollywood Studios. Slinky Dog Dash is not on my coast, and you guys don't have Radiator Springs Racers, and you guys don't have Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. So it's like, it's hard. But if you were to go, like you said, layout, Hollywood Studios is a mess. But DCA is actually, there's so many different ways you can go, and you'll ultimately end up in the same place. And you're not going to have to do it by going some weird obscure route or backtracking all the way back because you got bottlenecked. The only time I feel like you really have to backtrack is if you hit Cars Land, because it's a dead end and you have to turn around and go back down Main Street and come back. But yeah, ultimately for me, this was a fight between DCA and Hollywood Studios, because I can't even put it up against any other one. I already know it's not as good as those other parks, but it is better in my opinion than Hollywood Studios.
And in a previous episode of Factor Figment, we asked if Cars Land was the best themed land in Disneyland Resort, and you said yes. So you were sort of putting Cars Land above Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, which then means that the one thing that Hollywood Studios has going for it, you still have DCA having a better version. Now, I'm not saying that's etched in stone.
Right.
That Star Wars Galaxy's Edge is worse than Cars Land. But if you put up these two lands and say at very worst they're 1A and 1B, it would be really hard to make a case taking Galaxy's Edge out of Hollywood Studios and making a case that it's better than California Adventure without Cars Land. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Hollywood Studios needs a lot of work. It needs a little bit of fixing. And that's unfortunate because it just got a lot of work. It is probably
a whole lot of shade.
The last park that's going to get anything new. They're probably going to roll all the way through. Right now they're at Epcot. They have been adding things to Magic Kingdom. They've been adding things to DCA, to Disneyland. Disney's Animal Kingdom is going to be getting some new stuff at some point soon, I believe. So Hollywood Studios needs the most and got the most recently, so isn't going to be getting anything for a while. So I think it is probably a slam dunk that Hollywood Studios is the worst U.S. Disney park. However, I will say that I think Animal Kingdom, Epcot, and Disneyland are better than DCA. I know people have problems with Magic Kingdom, but just the sheer number of rides, I think DCA might be second worst.
Second worst.
Or second least best, or whatever you want to say. Fact or figment? Disney should abandon the Nightmare Before Christmas overlay of Haunted Mansion.
Fact. 100% fact. I know a lot of people love it, and I respect your opinion, but I don't agree. Fact, get rid of it. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of seeing it every time I'm there because of the time of year we go. I'm tired of it going up at Halloween because it is not scary, and I want scary. And I mean, not that the Haunted Mansion is necessarily scary, but yeah, I do not like how long the layover is up. I don't like that I'm over it. I am over it.
I definitely think it is up for way too long.
So long.
Even if this is a Figment and they shouldn't get rid of it, they shouldn't do it for as long as they do it.
Yeah. I mean, from pre-Halloween to after Christmas, come on. Come on. Come on.
And I don't necessarily have an answer for what they should do because I know it takes a long time to do the crossover. Like, right. I wish that they could let it run on Halloween night and then the next day start the overlay.
Right.
If they could do it in 2 weeks, maybe.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I definitely think this causes more problems than it solves, even though I do like the overlay of Nightmare Before Christmas on Haunted Mansion.
Well, it was closed when we were there in August. My husband and I, a few years back before that, went in February, and it was closed again to take it off.
That's too much.
February. And it had been closed for weeks and weeks and weeks. And like when we were there, it had been closed. How long had already been closed then? And it still wasn't going to be open for another amount of time after we left. And it's like, it's ridiculous. Like, it was cool the first couple times, but it just gets to the point I'm over it. I want my traditional Haunted Mansion. I want my Scary Bride. I want my ballroom dancing ghosts. I don't want Jack and Sally on everything. I want my Madame Leota.
It goes down for this refurbishment around the Major League Baseball trade deadline, and it doesn't open up again normally until spring training is about to start.
It's ridiculous. It is so ridiculous. Makes me so irritated. That's why what I love about the Haunted Mansion in Magic Kingdom is it is always the Haunted Mansion. Always. And I love it. And you know what? If they want to do a new overlay that I would be down for, Muppets. Do the Muppet Haunted Mansion. I would be all about putting that in there because it would be the OG original Haunted Mansion plus Kermit the Frog.
Factor Figment. Times change, and it's time to allow more alcohol in Disneyland Park.
Oh, if people aren't going to abuse it and start trashing everything in the park, fact. I mean, what's it going to hurt? We've had alcohol at DCA since it opened, and doesn't seem to be any issue over there. So I think, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't really understand the reason they didn't have it in the first place. Maybe because it's supposed to be more family friendly, but I mean, I'm not saying margarita vendors walking down Fantasyland, but the restaurants having alcohol, I mean, I don't see the harm in that at all.
So I'm not a let's do everything the way it's always been done kind of person. I think I kind of like the fact that Disneyland Park is really the one place where you don't see a lot of alcohol, but it also wouldn't bother me if alcohol came to Disneyland Park.
Yeah.
I think it is only a matter of time. They're starting to sneak it in more and more over at Magic Kingdom and Walt Disney World. And I think that it's only a matter of time before they start sneaking it in more and more at Disneyland. And then eventually it happens.
I mean, I don't mind, especially like if they're just putting it in restaurants and stuff to kind of start. Okay, great. So you have a drink with your meal. Like I said, you don't need margarita vendors walking down the street. You don't need people hawking it like down like a baseball game down Main Street. But I don't think it hurts anything to have. I mean, ultimately, they're not super strong drinks anyway, in my opinion.
Yeah, because you don't want Disneyland turning into Epcot's World Showcase.
Right.
Where
you don't want to be drinking
it becomes about drinking, but I don't think that people having drinks is that big of a deal.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree.
Factor Figment. Attractions like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride are antiquated because Disney has new, more popular intellectual properties that need rides?
Oh, that's tough. But I'm going to say Figment, because I feel like rides like Mr. Toad, it's great to bring in new IP. I love new intellectual property. I love they're bringing in new stuff like Tiana. But at the same time, I do love that they keep rides like at Disneyland, like Mr. Toad, because it's this fun nostalgia and it's a good mix, I feel, between the older stuff and the newer stuff without making it completely about one side or the other.
This is a Figment. Mr. Toad's Wild Ride is a national treasure. I think the president of the United States should declare it like a national park or whatever could happen to make sure that this never disappears and we have it forever. No, on serious note, I don't mind Mr. Toad's Wild Ride not being at Magic Kingdom anymore. I think Walt Disney World doesn't have that nostalgia or that connection to being a park where Walt actually walked and spent days, and Disneyland is never finished and they're going to add things to it, and I don't mind that. I would just like a few things to stay because we want to have that connection to this being the first one, this being the initial park, Walt's Park. I like having Main Street USA be less of like a conveyor belt Ford factory like it is over at Magic Kingdom. I like that they have some of these rides that aren't attached to new IP. I like It's a Small World. I like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Even Peter Pan's Flight, which I don't ride when I'm in Disneyland. I still like that it's there. It just feels like that is what separates Disneyland Park from the other Disney parks, that I am more likely to accept big, major changes away from some of the more obscure intellectual properties.
I don't have anything else to say.
See, when I can just encapsulate everything so perfectly.
Exactly. I was like, I don't have anything to add to that.
Last one here. Fact or Figment? And I think we've touched on this a few times over the course of these 3 episodes where we have talked about Disneyland Resort as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Disneyland's attempt to attract more vacationers while trying to maintain Magic Key annual pass holders is making everyone upset.
Wait, read that one more time.
Disneyland's attempt to attract more vacationers while trying to maintain Magic Key annual pass holders is making everyone upset. So I look at it kind of like they are trying to please everybody. Mm-hmm. And through doing that, they are annoying everybody. That's sort of the point of the question.
Well, to me, it annoys me when they only focus on one side or the other. So, I mean, that's a tough one for me, because if Disney focuses on bringing people into the parks that aren't Magic Key holders, because they want more people to come into the parks, especially Disneyland, who they're trying to rebuild like their customer base, then the Magic Key holders get mad. But then when they focus solely on the Magic Key holders and what their demands are, people like me are mad. So it's like, it's a double-edged sword. You can't please everyone.
So then,
and when you
fact,
try to please
right?
everyone, so yeah. So it annoys that no matter what Disney does, it's gonna annoy somebody. And so it's like, okay, Disney, if you focus on trying to get those of us who can't afford a Magic Key, or we don't go frequently enough, which is like my family, we don't go enough to justify buying a Magic Key. I mean, I can't afford plane tickets to California every couple months. That's crazy. And for my family, I'm not saying that for everyone. And it's like, so I'm not going to spend the money on a Magic Key. But then at the same time, it's like, then I see like, oh, I'm going to start planning it, but everything we want to do is focus solely on Magic Key people. So then it's like, okay, well, Sorry, Disney, but it's like I'm not happy either way. So, I mean, yeah, so fact. Fact. You're not going to please everybody all the time ever.
There is a capacity issue at Disneyland that does not exist over in Walt Disney World, where Walt Disney World has these huge, gigantic theme parks
Yes.
with space and space and space between them, and resorts and water parks and Disney Springs and miniature golf and regular golf and all of this stuff. Hiking trails we found the one time.
Right.
And because of Disneyland's limited capacity, I feel like it is creating this war between the vacationers and the Magic Key holders, because every time Disney tries to move the pendulum a little bit this way, it's going to bother the other group of people. And it is such a delicate balancing act. Like that guy who tried to walk between the two World Trade Center towers on a rope the one time. Like you just have to balance everything completely perfectly, or you are going to be annoying a big part of your fan base. So this is what I think is Disneyland's biggest problem in a nutshell over the next few years, is trying to please two very, very different groups of people. Walt Disney World doesn't have to worry about annual pass holders as much as Disneyland has to worry about Magic Key holders. So this is going to be the thing that's going to be on Bob Iger's desk for the rest of his contract.
Yeah. One thing too with the whole, like, speaking of the Magic Key thing, is I have family members and friends who live in Southern California, because that's where a lot of my family's from. And all of them got rid of their annual passes because they said as soon as they put the payment plans in place and all that, it was so inundated with people where they would go before to hang out and things like that. And they'd go occasionally, like on weekends or things like that, and enjoy the fact they were around all these people from other places and people on vacation. So it was really chill. And they were like, this is really fun to go visit. And my aunt was telling me, it got to the point it was so inundated with locals and people who live locally that had annual passes then, that it was not fun anymore, because all it was people in there fighting each other over different things. And they were there literally all the time. And they were like, it was no longer fun because it wasn't people who were there enjoying themselves on vacation. It was people there arguing and complaining, and that it's not this, it's not that, because they're there literally all the time. And so they actually got rid of them. And then when they took them away completely, they didn't re-up when the Magic Key came, because they were like, we don't want to deal with this again. Like it wasn't fun for us to go anymore, because it's all at the point at that time, because now they've like cut back on the amount that they offer that people can, which I know is a huge point of contention of, oh my gosh, I can't even get a Magic Key. They were like, well, I wasn't going to get one anyway because I was so tired of going and just seeing the same people every time, or hearing people complaining that, oh, well, when I was here 2 days ago or 2 weeks ago, and it was like, they're like, it's just not fun anymore. It's not fun because it was so inundated with just locals. It became like a local hangout spot.
What a great episode this was, Sarah. Just another really fun conversation. Always love having you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. This is great.
This has been episode 139 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. If you're catching the show on our YouTube channel, please like, comment, and subscribe. We have a brand new episode of the podcast every Thursday, and next week will be no different. Until then, have a great week.